Hello, I'm River Moreland. Maybe you've heard of me, maybe not. But if you haven't, let me tell you something. I wasn't always this strong. No, once upon a time, I was just a girl thrown out into a snowstorm by the one person who was supposed to protect me. A girl abandoned, left alone with nothing but the cold and the weight of betrayal. I had to survive. I had to become something they never expected. And this is the story of how I fought back. I could feel the cold creeping through the thin walls of the house, the wind howling against the windows as it whipped through the trees. Outside, a snowstorm raged, but inside, the air felt heavy with something else, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. My stomach churned as I sat on the edge of my bed, packing the few things I could fit into the worn suitcase at my feet. I was trying to ignore the growing dread in my chest, the gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong. But even I couldn't fool myself. The tension had been building for weeks. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know what. I had always been the one to hold everything together in our family. I'd been the responsible one, the one who kept everything running smoothly, the one who always put everyone else's needs before my own. But lately, I could feel myself fading into the background, invisible to everyone but me. And now, in the middle of this snowstorm, I was packing my life into a suitcase. There was a sudden knock at the door, and I froze. My father's footsteps echoed in the hallway, followed by the soft sound of my stepmother's voice, low and anxious. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew they were talking about me. I could hear my name being whispered, my father's voice harsh and cold. My heart pounded in my chest, and my hands trembled as I zipped up my bag. I knew I couldn't stay in that room any longer. It was just a matter of time before I had to face whatever was coming. I stood up, taking one last look around the room. The place that had once been my sanctuary now felt suffocating. The walls, the bed, the worn carpet, it all seemed to be closing in on me, as if the very space I had called my own was rejecting me. I couldn't remember the last time I felt welcome here. My family's love had always felt conditional, and now it was clear, I was no longer needed. I took a deep breath and headed for the door. I stepped into the hallway, the house eerily quiet now, the shadows of the night stretching long across the floor. I could hear my father's voice growing louder, his steps approaching. There was no turning back. "River," he called out. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, and turned toward the stairs. My father was standing at the top, his silhouette a shadow against the dim light from the living room below. He looked at me with those cold, emotionless eyes, and I could see that something had shifted in him. He was no longer the father who had once held me close and told me everything would be okay. This man, the one standing at the top of the stairs, was a stranger, a man who had already made his decision. "It's time," he said, his voice low and final. "You need to leave." His words were like a slap to the face, the shock of it making the air around me freeze. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse right there in the hallway. "But, Dad," I tried to speak, my voice trembling, but he cut me off with a single, dismissive wave of his hand. "They deserve more than you," he said, his words piercing through the air like ice. "You've had your chance. You're not part of this family anymore." The world seemed to tilt on its axis, and I felt my knees weaken beneath me. I wasn't sure if I could stand, if I could take the weight of what he had just said. "They deserve more than you." The words echoed in my mind, over and over, each repetition cutting deeper into me. My father, the man who had raised me, had just told me that I wasn't worth his love, his attention, his family. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely alone. I wanted to scream, to beg him to take it back, to say anything that would make this nightmare stop. But there was nothing I could say. His eyes were cold, detached, as if he had already made his peace with this decision. And my stepmother, Laura, stood behind him, her arms crossed, watching silently. Her face was expressionless, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. She had won. I was no longer part of the picture. I stood frozen, my chest heaving with the weight of everything that had just happened. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. The silence in the hallway was deafening. I could hear the pounding of my own heart, the sharp intake of breath that barely kept me from collapsing. And then, without a word, my father turned and walked back down the stairs, leaving me standing there alone. The cold outside hit me like a punch in the gut as I stepped onto the porch. The snowstorm was fierce now, the wind howling through the streets, whipping the snow into a blinding frenzy. My breath came out in clouds as I looked around, not knowing where to go or what to do. I had been kicked out of my own home, left to fend for myself in the middle of a storm. I couldn't stay here. But where could I go? The reality of being abandoned settled over me, heavy and suffocating. I had no one. I had always believed that no matter what, my family would be there for me. But now I knew the truth. They didn't care. I wasn't a part of their life anymore. I was just a burden to them, a mistake they had to fix. As I walked down the street, the snow piling up around my boots, I felt the bitter sting of rejection. My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and pain, but one thing stood out: I was alone. And this time, there was no one coming to save me. I heard the sound of a car approaching and looked up, my heart racing. Was it my father, coming to apologize? Or someone else, someone who might help? But as the headlights of the car illuminated the street, I realized that it didn't matter. No one was coming. Not for me. The car passed by without slowing, and I was left standing in the snow, alone in the storm. The phone rang, and my heart skipped a beat. My fingers hovered over the screen, 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind. It was an unknown number, and for some reason, I already knew who it was. The years had passed, but the voice on the other end of the line would always be the same. It was Derek. My father. The man who had cast me aside like an unwanted piece of luggage. The man whose words still haunted me: "They deserve more than you." I hesitated for a moment, staring at the phone. My breath quickened, my palms clammy with the weight of this single decision. What was I supposed to say? After all these years, what could he possibly want? The bitterness swirled in my chest, but there was a flicker of something else. Something I didn't want to admit to myself. Curiosity. A small, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he had changed. I pressed answer. Hello? My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. River, he said, his voice smooth, almost practiced. It's been a long time. I think it's time we talk. The words were like daggers. Time to talk? Was that all he had to offer after 18 years? The words, "I've been thinking about you," or "I'm sorry for what I did," never came. Just a cold request to talk. A bitter laugh rose in my throat, but I swallowed it back. I wasn't going to let him have the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. Why now? I asked, trying to keep the shakiness out of my voice. After everything, why now? Because we're family, he said. And I've made a lot of mistakes. I want to make it right. I thought we could meet, maybe. Make it right? The words cut through the line like ice. Make it right? He had thrown me out in the snow without a second thought. That was his version of making it right? No. This time, he wasn't going to pull me back into the orbit of his selfishness. Not this time. I'll meet you, I said, my voice quiet but firm. But make no mistake, Derek. I owe you nothing. The meeting was set for later that evening at a restaurant in San Francisco, somewhere upscale, of course, where the smell of freshly uncorked wine and the hum of quiet conversations masked the tension between us. I had dressed carefully for the occasion, my dark dress a statement of just how far I had come since the last time I saw him. I was no longer the girl who was sent out into the storm, left alone and forgotten. I had grown, and I was going to show him just how much. The restaurant was far too fancy for comfort, but I held my head high as I walked in. I saw him immediately. Derek sat at a corner table, his graying hair slicked back, his suit perfectly tailored. His eyes softened when they met mine, but I knew better than to fall for that. This was all a game to him. River, he said, standing to greet me. His voice, smooth and warm, tried to play the part of the caring father. I didn't move to hug him. I didn't even smile. You look good, he said, still holding his hand out for a handshake. I took it briefly, pulling away as soon as I could. Cut the pleasantries, I said. What do you want? He winced, and I saw a flicker of the old man I used to know, the one who thought he could manipulate everyone around him. But there was also something new. Something I couldn't place. Fear? Maybe. For the first time in years, I could see that he wasn't entirely in control. I was. I've been thinking a lot, he began, taking his seat. About how things went down between us. And I know I made some mistakes. He paused, his eyes shifting as if searching for the right words. I never meant to hurt you, River. I could feel the resentment bubbling up inside of me, and it took all my willpower to hold it back. Really? I leaned forward, crossing my arms. Because I remember you telling me, they deserve more than you. So forgive me if I don't buy the "I'm sorry" act. Derek flinched, his face momentarily turning red. But then he straightened himself out, his voice regaining that air of authority. "You have to understand, River," he said, looking down at his wine glass. "It wasn't easy for me either. I was just trying to do what was best for the family. For everyone." "For everyone?" I felt the anger rising in my chest. "You threw me out for them. You turned your back on me, your own flesh and blood, because your new family deserved more. And now, after 18 years, you think you can waltz back in and pretend nothing happened?" The words were out before I could stop them, and I didn't care. I wasn't going to apologize. Not for my feelings. Not for the truth. Derek's eyes narrowed. "I was wrong, okay? But that doesn't mean we can't fix things now." I stared at him, disbelief settling into my bones. He was still the same man, the same manipulative and self-serving individual who believed everything should revolve around him. The only difference now was that he was trying to use me because he knew I had something he wanted: money. Fix things? I shook my head, taking a deep breath. "Let's get to the point. Why are you really here, Derek? Why are you really reaching out after all these years?" He hesitated for a moment, then leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "I need your help, River. The family is struggling. I need you to help me out financially." I stared at him, feeling my chest tighten. I couldn't believe this. It was the same manipulation, just in a different form. And I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. "I'll help you," I said, my voice steely. "But it won't be with money. And you're going to have to work for it." Derek looked taken aback, but he quickly recovered. "I understand. You've got your pride. But we're family, River." I almost laughed. Family? He had never treated me like family, not once. "No, Derek," I said softly, "we're not family anymore. You were never there for me when I needed you. So now, you don't get to make demands." I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The meeting was over. As I turned to leave, I heard Derek's voice behind me. "You'll regret this, River," he said, the desperation creeping into his tone. "You don't know what you're doing." I paused for just a second before answering, my voice calm and clear. "No. You'll regret it, Derek. For the rest of your life." The conversation had barely ended before the weight of what had just happened started to settle in. I had walked out of that meeting with my father, feeling as though I had made a bold move, but also as if I had left something behind. Something I was still unsure of, something I needed to confront. I was back in my apartment now, the city skyline stretching out in front of me through the large windows. The city was bustling as always, full of life, full of possibilities, but for me, it had always felt distant. Even now, it felt like I was watching everything unfold from a distance. How could the man who raised me, who was supposed to love me, say the things he said? "They deserve more than you." Those words repeated over and over in my mind like an incessant drumbeat. Every time I tried to push them away, they would return, sharper, more insistent. I had done everything for him. Everything for my family. And this is what I got in return. Abandoned. Cast aside. I turned away from the window and walked over to my desk. My reflection in the glass felt foreign. This strong, confident woman wasn't the same person I had been 18 years ago. No, I wasn't the same girl who had walked out into that snowstorm. That girl had been small, fragile, unsure of herself, with nothing but hope and a belief in family to hold on to. Now, here I was, successful, independent, and, most importantly, free. But freedom didn't come without its price. I sat down, running my hands through my hair, trying to clear my mind. The sound of my phone vibrating on the desk broke my focus. It was Gavin, my rock, the one person who had always believed in me. "Hey, River," his voice crackled through the speaker. "I know it's been a lot, but I think we need to talk about what happened today. The family, they're not just going to give up like that. You know that, right?" I closed my eyes, the weight of the conversation settling back on my shoulders. "I know, Gavin. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. He's still my father, and it's hard to think about just walking away from him. But I'm also so tired. Tired of being the one who always forgives and gives in." "You've come a long way," Gavin said, his voice soft. "But you can't let them keep pulling you back in. You've worked too hard to let them tear you down again." I could hear the concern in his voice, and I hated that he was right. I hated that he was always right. "You're right," I said, the words tasting bitter as I spoke them. I'm done trying to fix them. But what about the money, Gavin? What about all of this? My success, what happens when they come for it? You protect it, River. You fight for it. You don't owe them anything. Not anymore. The clarity of his words settled over me like a blanket. I didn't owe them anything. They had cast me out without a second thought. They had abandoned me when I was at my most vulnerable, and now that I had something they wanted, they expected me to just give it all back? Not a chance. I stood up abruptly, the decision crystallizing in my mind. I'm going to take control of this. I'm going to make sure they don't get a dime from me. Are you sure you're ready for this? Gavin asked. I have to be. The next day, I found myself sitting across from my father once more. This time, I wasn't just his daughter, I was his equal. The meeting was at a high-end conference room in one of the buildings downtown. The room was sleek, modern, but there was something cold about it. The kind of cold that only Derek could bring. I walked into the room with legal documents in hand, prepared to defend everything I had worked for. As I sat down across from Derek, I could feel the tension between us, thick and palpable. River, he said, his voice trying to sound casual. I'm glad we could meet. I know we've had our differences, but we're family. We need to settle this. I looked at him, the shadows under his eyes betraying the stress he was under. His words were rehearsed, designed to make him sound reasonable. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. No, Derek, I said, my voice steady. We don't need to settle anything. You've made it clear that I don't matter. You've made it clear that you've never cared for me. So now, you don't get to come back and ask for my help. Not after everything. His face twisted in disbelief. River, this isn't about us anymore. It's about what's best for the family. You don't understand, your mother and I have been struggling. This family needs you. I felt the anger rising in me again, hot and fierce. I had heard this all before, the same tired excuse. What's best for the family? You don't understand. I had heard it my whole life. But I wasn't a child anymore. You have no idea what's best for anyone, I shot back, my voice rising. You never cared about what was best for me. You only cared about what was easiest for you. And now that you've made a mess of everything, you want me to clean it up? No. I'm done. Derek's eyes flashed with something between anger and guilt, but he didn't speak. He knew. I had won this battle. But it wasn't over yet. As I left the meeting, a part of me felt lighter, almost as if I had finally shed a weight I had been carrying for years. I didn't need to fight for his approval anymore. I had my own life. But then, just as I was about to get into the elevator, my phone buzzed again. It was Gavin. River, you might want to take a look at this, he said. I opened the text he had sent me. It was a news article. My father had gone public with a statement, claiming that I owed him a large portion of my assets due to his sacrifices raising me. Sacrifices? The same man who had thrown me out in the snow, the same man who had told me I wasn't worthy of being his daughter, was now claiming he deserved part of my success? I stared at the screen in disbelief, my blood boiling. It wasn't over yet. Derek wasn't finished with me. I walked away from Derek's smug face with the taste of his words still fresh in my mouth. You'll regret it, River. Maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. But I had made my decision. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was shrinking back. I wasn't the same girl I was when I was kicked out in the snow, left to fend for myself. The drive back to my office in downtown San Francisco was a blur. My mind replayed the confrontation with Derek over and over, each word of his still ringing in my ears. They deserve more than you. I wasn't sure if I could ever fully move on from that, from the father who had abandoned me when I needed him the most. But I was done trying to please him. I stepped into the quiet of my office, the familiar hum of the city outside offering no comfort. I looked at the view of San Francisco from the windows, the sprawling city below, but it was all meaningless now. Nothing felt like home anymore. My mind wandered as I sank into my chair, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. I wasn't a little girl anymore. I wasn't the one left out in the cold, with no family, no future. I had made something of myself. I had my own life now. But was it really worth it? Was everything I had done, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, worth this emptiness? I wasn't sure, but there was no turning back now. My assistant knocked gently on the door, breaking my thoughts. River, she said softly, you have a message from Gavin. I picked up the phone with a heavy sigh. It was from him, just like I expected. He's on his way. It's time. The words hit me like a wave, crashing over the calm facade I'd carefully built. Gavin had been with me through all of it. The family drama, the legal battles, the heartache. But now we were here. This was it. The moment where I would finally put everything to rest. I had already prepared the documents. Everything was in place. The proof I had gathered, the financial records from my past, the hidden truths about Derek and my stepmother. The legal battle wasn't just about money. It was about power. My power. My future. I closed my eyes for a moment and thought about what this had all cost me. The years of feeling invisible, the sacrifices I had made, the tears I had shed in silence. But now I knew. I knew who I was. The meeting was set. A sleek, modern conference room in a neutral building. The large windows showcased the city's skyline, but it didn't bring me the same comfort it used to. Instead, I felt the weight of the moment, the weight of what was about to happen. I knew Derek and Nyla would be there. They would try to pull me back in, to make me feel guilty for the success I had fought for. They would try to manipulate me again, just like they always had. When I entered the room, Derek was already seated. He was dressed in his usual expensive suit, his posture confident, like he was still the man in charge. But I could see the faint nervousness in his eyes, the slight tremble in his hands. He knew this wasn't going to be easy for him. And it wasn't. "River," he said, trying to sound calm but failing. "I'm glad we could finally meet. I've had a lot of time to think, and I want to make things right. We're family." The word caught in my throat, bitter and unbelievable. Family? He hadn't treated me like family in years. I wasn't about to let him rewrite history. "Family?" I repeated, my voice cold. "Is that what you call it? You threw me out, Derek. You abandoned me. That's not family." He flinched, his face going pale. But he quickly regained his composure. "River, I was wrong. But I've learned. I want to help you, to make things right." "Make things right?" I said, shaking my head. "You don't get to come back into my life just because I'm successful now. I owe you nothing. You don't get to manipulate me anymore." The words hung in the air between us. Derek's face twisted with anger, but there was something more. Fear. He knew I wasn't the same daughter he had left behind. He wasn't used to being challenged. "You wouldn't have made it without me," he said, his voice turning defensive. "You owe me. You wouldn't be here without me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wouldn't be here without him? I laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "I don't owe you anything, Derek. You didn't help me. You used me." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Derek's eyes darted to Nyla, standing behind him, watching with cold eyes. I knew she had been in on this, playing the game with him. She wasn't a victim, she was a willing accomplice. "You used me," I repeated, my voice growing stronger. "I've been your pawn for too long. Not anymore." I stood up, placing the legal documents on the table in front of him. "I'm done with this. You're not getting anything from me. Not anymore." Derek looked at the papers, his face turning red with fury. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "I've had enough of your excuses, Derek," I said firmly. "You don't get to manipulate me anymore. I'm not the same girl who walked out into that snowstorm. I don't need you anymore." I turned to leave the room, the sound of Derek's voice following me. "You'll regret this," he called after me, desperation lacing his words. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I was done. I sat back in my office chair, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I could see the city outside through the large windows, but it felt so distant, as if I was watching it through a haze. I had faced my father, confronted the lies, and made my stand, but something still gnawed at me. The phone buzzed on my desk, breaking my train of thought. Gavin's name flashed on the screen. I picked up the phone, ready to hear his voice. Gavin had been my rock throughout all of this, and I needed him now more than ever. "Hey, River," Gavin said, his voice calm but with a hint of urgency. "I think we need to talk about what's next. Things are escalating faster than we thought. Your father's making some noise. It's not over yet." My chest tightened. I knew he was right. The fight with Derek was only the beginning. The legal battle had barely started, and already, it felt like it was going to consume everything. "I know," I replied, my voice steady but laced with frustration. "I thought I had ended it today, but it's like he won't stop. I just don't get it, Gavin. After all these years, why is he still trying to control me? Why does he think he deserves anything from me? You're not alone in this, River, Gavin said. But you've got to be prepared for what's coming next. They're going to keep fighting. You've made it clear that you're done playing by their rules, but they won't just walk away. Not without a fight. I leaned back, letting his words sink in. I had taken control today, I had exposed the manipulation, but it wasn't enough. I knew Derek would try to keep pulling me back into his world, into his narrative, but I wasn't going to let him. Not this time. I'll handle it, I said, my voice firm. I've fought too hard for this. I'm not going to let them take it away. I'm ready for whatever comes next. The next morning, my legal team and I met in a sleek, sterile conference room, one of the many I'd grown accustomed to over the years. The walls were lined with books and papers, the smell of freshly printed contracts lingering in the air. The only sound was the rustle of papers being shuffled as my attorney, Sarah, went through the latest updates. River, we've reviewed everything, Sarah said, adjusting her glasses. We've got a solid case, but it's going to be a long road. Derek and his lawyers are fighting back harder than we anticipated. They're playing dirty. I nodded, feeling the tension building in my chest. My hands were clenched on the table in front of me, the skin on my knuckles turning white. But I wasn't going to let the fear take over this time. I had the power now. I'm not backing down, I said, my voice quieter now, but resolute. I'm done being their pawn. They won't take anything from me again. This time, I'm in control. Sarah smiled slightly, clearly relieved at my confidence. Good. That's the mindset we need. But as I looked around the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The legal battle was just a reflection of the deeper fight I was in, one for my identity, my self-worth. Derek had been the architect of my pain, and now I was the one who had to stand tall, even though a part of me still wanted to run. But running wasn't an option anymore. The next meeting was set for the following week. Derek and his team had called for a family conference, hoping to resolve things one last time. But we both knew this wasn't about resolution. It was about power. It was about his need to feel like he still had control over me. When I walked into that conference room, I felt different. I wasn't the scared girl who had walked out into the snowstorm all those years ago. I was a businesswoman, a fighter, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Derek, dictate my life again. Derek was sitting at the head of the table, his usual smug expression plastered on his face. Nyla sat beside him, her posture perfect, always the picture of grace and charm, hiding the manipulative streak beneath her polished exterior. Laura, my stepmother, sat across from them, her eyes cold but calculating. I thought we could have an honest conversation, River, Derek said as I entered, trying to sound warm. We need to put the past behind us. We're family. We've always been family. I cut him off before he could continue. We're not family, I said, my voice hard. I'm not the same person I was back then, and I'm not here to discuss the past with you. You had your chance. You failed me. And now, you want me to clean up your mess? Derek's face faltered for just a moment. He wasn't used to being confronted. Nyla, however, spoke up, her voice sweet but with a sharp edge. River, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We're just trying to help you. Families should stick together. You can't keep pushing us away. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. But I didn't flinch. I couldn't. I had worked too hard to get where I was. They were the ones who had pushed me away, not the other way around. And now, they expected me to help them, just because they claimed to be family. No, Nyla, I said, my voice colder now. You've always been the golden child. The perfect one. The one who never had to work for anything. But now that I've built something of my own, you think you can just waltz back in and take it? Her lips curled into a tight smile, but I saw the flicker of frustration in her eyes. Derek cleared his throat, trying to steer the conversation back on track. But I could feel the tension in the room tightening. This wasn't going to be a peaceful resolution. You don't get to manipulate me anymore, I continued, leaning forward. I don't owe you anything. I've already lost enough. I looked down at the documents in front of me, legal papers that would end this once and for all. This wasn't just about the money, the assets, or the family legacy. It was about something much deeper. It was about my life, my choices, and finally taking control. I've given enough to this family, I said, standing up. And I'm done. As I turned to leave, I felt the weight of their eyes on me. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt freeing. The phone call with Gavin left me more unsettled than I cared to admit. I had already made the decision. I was going to stand my ground, no more playing nice, no more accommodating their manipulation. But the reality of it hit me in waves. I had confronted Derek, yes. But I knew the family wasn't going to give up that easily. I wasn't ready for what was coming next. I walked back into my legal office in San Francisco, a place that had always been filled with a sense of security, until now. Today felt different. My mind was racing through the logistics, the legal implications, the family's next move. I had worked so hard for everything I had, and yet I knew Derek and Nyla wouldn't stop. They never had before. They wouldn't now. As I walked past the shelves lined with law books and financial documents, I could hear the faint hum of the city outside. The world seemed to be moving on as usual, unaware of the storm that was about to hit me from all sides. I sat at my desk, fingers lightly tapping on the surface. How had I gotten here? From that girl who had been kicked out into the snow to this, sitting in a glass-walled office, surrounded by everything I had worked for. It wasn't just about the money. It was about taking control. It was about finally confronting the family that had abandoned me and fighting for my identity, my sense of self. I hadn't just built a career, I had built a life that wasn't going to be defined by them anymore. The phone buzzed again, and I glanced at the screen. It was Gavin. He had been my rock through all of this. I picked it up quickly. River, listen, Gavin's voice came through, sounding urgent. I don't know how, but the family's lawyer has somehow gone public with the claim. They're not just trying to manipulate you anymore, they're attacking your reputation. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just a legal issue anymore. It was an all-out war. They're calling it a mismanagement of your funds, Gavin continued. They're trying to paint you as a fraud, River. It's ugly. The anger built in my chest. I could already feel the weight of what was coming. It wasn't enough that they had tried to control me, abandon me, and manipulate me for years. Now they were trying to destroy everything I had worked for. And I wasn't about to let them. I'm not going to back down, Gavin, I said, my voice cold with determination. This is it. I'm going to fight back, legally and emotionally. I'm done with them. The meeting with my legal team was a blur of papers and strategy. We laid out our plan, how to combat the lies Derek and his lawyer were spreading. They were using every trick in the book to try to undermine me. And for a moment, I thought about what it would feel like to just give up. To let them have their way. But then I remembered the girl who had walked out into that snowstorm. She wouldn't recognize the woman I was becoming. I wasn't going to let them win. As the team discussed legal angles, I was aware of the growing weight of it all. The emotional toll was starting to show, the draining effect of fighting a battle that I hadn't asked for. But it didn't matter. I had already made my decision. I was fighting for my future, not just for my assets but for everything I had worked for. And for the first time, I knew I wasn't alone. I had Gavin. I had my team. I had myself. The next day, I found myself walking into a luxurious law office. The kind of place where the walls were polished marble and the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne. The atmosphere here was thick with power, a kind of tension I was all too familiar with. I had been to this kind of office before. I had seen the faces of people like Derek, people who thought they could buy anything, manipulate anyone. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't going to be pushed around. Derek and his lawyer were already waiting for me. They sat in the center of the room, their posture perfect, their smiles deceptive. Derek looked at me, his eyes sharp and calculating. Nyla sat beside him, her eyes cool but expectant, like she had already won. They hadn't, though. Not yet. River, Derek said, his tone trying to sound fatherly, but I could hear the edge of manipulation in his voice. I'm glad you've come. We need to resolve this. You don't have to make this a public spectacle. I looked at him, feeling the familiar anger rising in my chest. I didn't make this a spectacle, Derek, I said, my voice low but firm. You did. You and your lawyer, spreading lies about me. And now you want me to clean up your mess? Derek shifted in his chair, his jaw tight. You don't understand, River. I've been trying to protect you. I did what I thought was best. I leaned forward, my eyes never leaving his. Protect me? You abandoned me. You told me I wasn't worth your time, that they deserved more than me. You didn't protect me, Derek. You protected yourself. Nyla's hand tightened on the edge of the table, and I saw her glance at Derek, but she didn't speak. It didn't matter. Her silence was enough. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't afraid of them. You think that just because you're my father, you can control me? I said, my voice rising slightly. You think you can manipulate me into feeling guilty, into giving you what you want? You're wrong. There was a moment of silence, Derek's eyes flickering with something like frustration, but there was also something else. Fear. He didn't like this new version of me. I'm not going to be your pawn anymore, I said. I've earned everything I have. You didn't help me. You never did. You took from me. I owe you nothing. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Derek opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. No, I said firmly. I've had enough. I'm done. I turned to leave the room, my steps purposeful, my heart pounding in my chest. For the first time, I felt like I was walking away from the past. I wasn't going to let them, drag me back into their world of manipulation and control. I had worked too hard to get here. And I wasn't about to let them take it from me. I left the conference room, feeling the weight of my decision settle deep within me. The door shut behind me with a finality that almost made my knees give out. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry, maybe both, but the truth was undeniable. I had just taken control of my life in a way I hadn't done in years. But there was no time for celebration. The real fight was just beginning. Derek and Nyla wouldn't go down easily. They never had before, and I wasn't fool enough to think this was the end of it. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I stepped into the elevator. It was a message from Gavin, his name lighting up the screen. River, just got word from our team. Derek and his lawyer are planning their next move. They won't let you go that easily. I swallowed hard as the elevator doors slid shut, the tension pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. I thought I'd won. I thought I had finally broken free from the family that had kept me tied to their games of manipulation and control. But no. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The elevator reached the ground floor, and I stepped out into the lobby, pulling my coat tightly around me to shield myself from the cold. I could feel the weight of my father's betrayal still lingering, but I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had fought my way to this point, and I wasn't going to let them, take it away from me. I reached my car, the familiar hum of the engine grounding me as I navigated through the streets of San Francisco. I drove aimlessly for a while, the bright lights of the city a stark contrast to the darkness I felt inside. I'd spent so many years chasing approval from my family, trying to prove myself worthy of their love. I was done with that now. It was time for me to write my own story, and I wasn't going to let anyone, including my family, control the narrative. The sound of my phone ringing broke through the quiet of the car. It was Gavin again. I answered immediately. River, he said, his voice steady but laced with concern. I need you to listen to me. Derek's team is circulating rumors about you in the press. They're trying to paint you as a fraud, claiming you mismanaged your inheritance. They'll stop at nothing to ruin you. You have to prepare for this. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The battle was escalating. It was no longer just about my father's lies, it was about everything I had built, everything I had worked for. They wanted to tear it down, and they'd use anything, anyone, to do it. I know, I said, my voice a mix of frustration and determination. I'm ready for them. Gavin was silent for a moment. Just don't let them get to you. You have the truth on your side. You've been fighting your whole life for this. Don't let them take it from you. I took a deep breath, the words settling into my chest like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. He was right. I had fought for everything I had. And I wasn't about to let them tear it down without a fight. I pulled up to my apartment and parked, staring at the building for a moment before stepping out of the car. I didn't feel the relief I thought I would, just a growing sense of unease. I'd been waiting for this moment for years, the chance to finally stand up for myself, to claim my life, my power. But now that it was here, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. I had no choice but to face the consequences of my actions. The truth would come out, whether I was ready or not. That night, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the papers in front of me, legal documents, press releases, statements from my lawyer. I had a choice to make. I could continue to fight, continue to expose the truth, or I could walk away. But walking away wasn't an option anymore. I thought back to everything that had brought me here, the years of sacrifice, the betrayal that had shaped me, and the strength I had finally found. It wasn't just about the money or the assets. It was about my life. My decisions. My future. And I wasn't going to let Derek or anyone else take that from me. The phone rang again, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Derek's lawyer. "Ms. Moreland," the lawyer's voice said, formal and cold. "We're moving forward with a legal challenge. We'll be filing for a public hearing on your assets. This isn't over." I felt my heart race, but I didn't let the fear show. "Then I guess we'll see you in court." I hung up without another word, the weight of the situation settling deeper into my bones. Later that evening, I found myself staring at the wall, the silence of my apartment deafening. The family I once thought I would have forever was gone. What I had now was my own, built on my own terms. It was lonely, but it was real. The more I thought about everything, the more I realized that this battle wasn't just about Derek or the money, it was about reclaiming myself. The door of my office clicked shut behind me as I stepped away from the chaos of the legal meeting. A quiet stillness wrapped around me, much like the silence I'd come to know over the years. I had faced Derek and Nyla, and for the first time, I felt that I was no longer just a participant in their game. I had finally taken control. The sound of the city, faint in the background of my high-rise apartment, echoed through my mind. It was odd, almost surreal. I had come so far from that day in the snowstorm when I was discarded like an afterthought. The years I spent trying to please my family, to make them see me, to prove my worth, it all seemed like another life. But it wasn't just the fight for my business or my assets anymore. It was about something much more fundamental, my right to exist on my own terms. I walked over to the large windows of my penthouse, watching the city skyline stretch far beyond the horizon. San Francisco sprawled beneath me, a city full of possibility and promise, but all I could think about was the decisions I had made, the family I had left behind, and the future I was beginning to claim. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension that had settled into my bones. But the truth was, no matter how far I had come, I wasn't truly free yet. Derek's claim, his demand for a piece of what I'd worked so hard for, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the power. About the control that I had never been allowed to have. I walked back to my desk and sat down, pulling the papers in front of me again. The documents of disinheritance. The final step. The final severing of ties. The end of everything I had once wanted, my family's acceptance, their love, their approval. I had never needed them. I knew that now. But still, the weight of the decision pressed down on me. Could I really leave them behind forever? Could I really walk away from all of that history, all those years of trying to fit into a space that wasn't made for me? I closed my eyes, trying to quiet the inner conflict. But in the quiet of my office, I found clarity. I had already walked away once, when I left that house in the storm, carrying nothing but the clothes on my back. Now, I was walking away again, but this time, I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was standing on my own 2 feet. And I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their world of manipulation. I had earned this. The life I had now was mine and mine alone. The phone buzzed on my desk, pulling me from my thoughts. I didn't need to check to know who it was. "Gavin." I answered, my voice steady. "Hey, Gavin. You're really going through with it, huh?" he asked, his voice laced with a mix of concern and support. "This is it, River. The family's not going to back down. You know that, right?" I felt the familiar twinge of unease, but I pushed it away. "I know," I said, my voice tight but sure. "But I'm not backing down either." There was a pause on the other end, then Gavin spoke again. "You've worked too hard for this, River. Don't let them take it from you." "I won't," I replied, the words strong and confident. "It's time to finish this. Once and for all." The next morning, the courtroom loomed ahead of me like a battlefield. I had been here before, but it was different this time. This time, I wasn't just standing there to listen to what they had to say. This time, I was in control. I walked into the private courtroom with my legal team, the heavy doors closing behind me with a sound that echoed in the silence. I could feel the weight of Derek's presence as he sat across from me, his suit pressed perfectly, his face set in a mask of confidence. But this time, the mask was slipping. Nyla was beside him, her icy demeanor never faltering. She looked at me with that same calculating gaze, and I could almost hear her thinking, "She's not as strong as she thinks." But I wasn't going to let her or Derek undermine me again. I walked up to the table, my lawyer handing me the documents. The papers I needed to end this. The final severance. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Derek's lawyer stood to make the opening statements, but I barely heard him. My mind was focused on one thing: this was the end. My lawyer spoke next, outlining the case, how Derek had tried to claim a part of what was mine, how he'd tried to twist the truth to suit his needs. The lies he had spread about me, about my success. The judge listened carefully, but I could feel the air shift. The momentum was shifting in my favor. Derek stood up to speak, his voice rising with frustration. "River, you don't understand. You're throwing away everything we've built as a family. You don't walk away from that. You're going to regret this for the rest of your life. You wouldn't be where you are without me." I looked at him, and for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was free. "You're wrong," I said quietly, standing to face him. "I didn't need you. You abandoned me. And for the last time, I'm not your pawn." As Derek stammered in disbelief, I reached into my bag and pulled out the documents of disinheritance. I placed them on the table, the sound of the paper sliding across the table a final declaration. "This is the last time I'm ever going to have to explain myself to you," I said, my voice cold and final. "I'm cutting all ties with you. Everything I've worked for is mine. And you don't get to take it from me anymore." Derek's face flushed with rage. He didn't have the power he thought he had anymore. The weight of the situation hit him, and he stood there, unable to speak. Nyla shot me a venomous look, but I didn't flinch. I had finally done it. I had taken back everything. As the judge ruled in my favor, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. But there was a lingering feeling, a feeling I couldn't shake. The battle was over, but the scars it left weren't going to vanish overnight. I turned to leave, the weight of my victory still settling in. I wasn't sure if I felt more relief or emptiness, but I knew one thing: the chapter with my family was officially closed. I stood in the middle of the empty room, the weight of my final decision slowly sinking in. The battle with my family was over. The court had ruled in my favor, the legal documents had been signed, and I was no longer tied to them in any way. But the emptiness remained, still present, like a shadow in the corner of my mind. I couldn't help but wonder if I'd made the right choice, if there would always be that little tinge of regret. But I quickly shook the thought off. No more regrets. No more looking back. It was time to move forward. I walked over to the window, staring out at San Francisco as the sunlight filtered through the blinds. The city that had always seemed so far away from me now felt familiar, even comforting. It had been a long road to get here, a long fight to regain control of my life. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly free. The sound of my phone ringing interrupted my thoughts. It was Gavin, his name flashing across the screen. I hesitated before answering. I knew what he was going to say. The aftermath of my family's manipulations still lingered, even though the legal battle had ended. "Hey, River," Gavin's voice was steady but carried a note of concern. "I just wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I replied, though I wasn't sure I believed myself. "I did what I needed to do. The family won't come after me again. I've cut all ties." "Good," he said. "But I know you, River. You've been through a lot, and the emotional toll isn't something you can just erase." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words. Gavin was right. Cutting ties with my family wasn't as simple as signing papers and walking away. The emotional scars they had left on me would take much longer to heal than any legal victory. "Yeah," I said, my voice quieter now. "I guess it'll take time." We talked for a while longer, but as the conversation ended, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more I needed to do. The legal victory was final, yes. But emotionally? I wasn't sure I could say the same. Later that evening, I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror, the soft hum of the city below barely audible. I stared at my reflection for a long time, not recognizing the woman I saw. I had changed, of course. The years of manipulation and abandonment had carved deep grooves into my soul, but I had built something new, something that no one could take from me. But was it enough? The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. My heart skipped a beat. For a brief moment, I thought it was Derek, or maybe Nyla, coming to finish what they had started. But I quickly pushed that thought away. I was done with them. When I opened the door, I was greeted not by family, but by Gavin, my constant. He smiled, his presence calming, but I could see the same concern in his eyes that I had been feeling myself. He stepped inside without a word, his eyes scanning the room before they landed on me. You look like you could use some company, he said, his voice soft but full of understanding. I nodded and led him to the living room, where we sat together in the comfortable silence that had always marked our friendship. He didn't push me to talk, but I knew the question was hanging in the air between us. What now? I thought I'd be relieved, I said, breaking the silence. But now that the fight is over, I don't feel what I thought I would. Gavin didn't answer right away. He just gave me that steady, unspoken support, the kind of silence that offered a safe space for my thoughts. Maybe, he said, after a moment, it's not about feeling relieved. Maybe it's about finding peace. I smiled weakly. Peace? I think I'm still figuring out what that means. A few days later, I was at an event I had long planned, a charity fundraiser I had taken on as a way to give back to the community. The guest list was filled with key figures in the city, some I knew personally, others I didn't. The venue was beautiful, a perfect blend of sophistication and class. The mood was light, yet I could feel the subtle weight of expectation hovering in the air. This event, I realized, wasn't just about raising money. It was about my public declaration that I was done with the past, that I had moved on. I made my way up to the stage where I was supposed to give my speech. As I stepped up, the room fell into an expectant hush. I could feel the nerves in my stomach but steadied myself, taking a deep breath before beginning. Good evening, I started, my voice ringing through the microphone. Tonight, we come together for something bigger than any one of us. But for me, this night represents more than just charity. It represents healing. For a long time, I didn't know if I could find my way back to peace. But I'm here now, not because of what I've lost, but because of what I've gained. I paused, letting my words sink in. The eyes of the audience were on me, but I felt something shift within me, a sense of strength I hadn't recognized before. I had built my life from the ground up, piece by piece, and now, for the first time, I wasn't just doing this for others. I was doing this for myself. I've fought my whole life for this, I continued. But it wasn't the kind of fight I thought it would be. It was about letting go of the past, standing tall, and finally realizing that I deserve peace, just like everyone else. I could hear the murmurs of approval in the crowd, the nods, the quiet applause. But there was one face I couldn't stop searching for, Nyla's. I knew she would be here, somewhere. I had to face her, too, even if she didn't want to face me. As I finished my speech, I spotted her in the back of the room, standing by the bar. She was watching me, her gaze as cold and calculating as ever. She didn't move toward me, and for a moment, I thought maybe she was still trying to figure out how to play me. But I didn't move toward her. I didn't need to. Later that evening, after the speeches and the mingling, Nyla approached me. Her presence was calculated, poised, exactly the way she had always been. "River," she said, her voice smooth but with a hint of vulnerability. "We need to talk." I took a deep breath, the familiar wave of frustration creeping into my chest. "I don't know what there is left to say, Nyla." "I was wrong," she said quietly, a sincerity in her eyes that I hadn't expected. "I didn't understand what you were going through. I didn't realize how much you were hurting." I studied her for a moment. She had been my family, and yet, she had been just as much a part of the problem as Derek. I wanted to believe her, but I had learned the hard way not to trust too easily. "I understand," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to let you back into my life." She nodded, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. Maybe it was too little, too late. But I wasn't here to fix our broken past. I was here to build my future. "I'm moving on, Nyla," I said softly. "You can too." As we close this chapter, I want to leave you with this: the real power doesn't come from wealth or status, it comes from reclaiming your life after betrayal, standing up for yourself, and taking control of your own future. If you've ever been knocked down by life, remember this: you can always rise again, stronger than before. It's never too late to take control of your story. So, what's your next step? How will you reclaim your own power? I'd love to hear your thoughts, share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can follow the next chapter in this journey. Your story matters, and we're just getting started.